But before we open this foundation design book, there's something that's really, really important that you need to know. Whenever you make something in InDesign and you package it, one of the things that's cool that it'll do for you is it will go ahead and it'll pull all of your document fonts. It will package them, right? So it'll take everything that's being used inside of that document and it puts it inside of the package so that if you were to send this package off to the printer would have the fonts that they need to be able to go ahead and print your stuff. Now, the other reason that you would need to have these with you, and this is really important, is that you might very well, most likely actually, you're going to be working on this book in different places, meaning you're going to be working on them at school. And the school computers, you can install fonts, but you can't have the computer remember those fonts. And so you need to always be able to carry them around with you everywhere you go that you might sit down at a computer and start working. The easiest way, just so you know, to install on Windows, to install one of these fonts or any of these fonts is to right click them and to there's a little install button. You just say install, and that should work on Windows 7 and Windows 10. And if for some reason that doesn't work, then you need to actually drop them into your font folder. But the best way to do it is to right click the font and say install. That's on Windows. Now on a Mac, you're going to do things a little differently. We have Macs in the classroom where we meet. And so it's going to be important that you also understand how to do this on a Mac. Some of you guys might have Macs at home too. And so I'm going to show you some different ways of installing stuff, whether it's at home or whatever. Use it in FontBook on a computer at school. Now, the first thing that I want to point out is that I'm using in this particular book template is a set of Google fonts. So if for any reason you don't have these or these don't seem to work on your computer, let me just really quickly show you where you can go and load these. And the reason, you could use other fonts, but I'm going to strongly recommend that you go ahead and make sure that you've got your fonts loaded first, because, or at least these fonts loaded first, because they're actually in the document, because all of the formatting that I've done in here is based on using these fonts. You can always later, after you know that you've got time towards the end of the project, if you've got some extra time, you can go and format it with your own fonts and your own styles and things like that, especially if you've already used InDesign before. But otherwise, I would just go ahead and leave these as they are. Okay, so if for some reason these fonts don't work, like if you're on Windows and these TrueType fonts aren't working on your computer, what you can do is go to your browser and open Chrome or Firefox or Safari or something, and I want you to go to fonts.google.com. And I'll show you how you can download fonts. I'll also show you how you can look for different fonts. And this is a wonderful resource. It has free fonts both for web hosting and for print, which is great. And the reason that that's really terrific is because these are all free. They're actually really nice fonts. They're well designed and stuff. But you can also have a solution for a client where they don't have to pay for that font solution, because fonts are actually quite expensive. And the thing that's nice is that they can have something that's free both for web hosting and for print. You would be surprised, you'd be actually quite surprised at how expensive it would be to host a lot of really nice fonts that are not free on the web. So you have to pay for separate kind of licensing for those. So what I'm going to do right off the bat is come up here where it says search, and I'm going to type the word Oswald. Okay, and then it automatically pulls up Oswald, and so you can click this little plus symbol and you see that it adds a selected family. And then the next thing I'm going to do is type Roboto. So it's spelled R-O-B-O-T-O. And you'll see that some different Robotos come up, and the one that I'm going to use is just the plain old regular Roboto by Christian Robertson. So click on this plus symbol and you'll see now I've got two families selected, and if I click on this little thing down here, it pops up, and you'll notice the first thing it does is it tries to tell you how to put these inside of web applications like in HTML files and CSS and stuff. Well, that's useful if you're doing a campaign that's a larger campaign, but for us right now, that's not what we're doing. We're going to download these. So you come up to this little download arrow button and you click on that, and then it's going to automatically try to tell you where to download it. And in this case, this is only if you are having problems with those other ones. You're going to navigate one of two places. All right, so if this is your home computer and this is the computer that you use all the time, you might as well go ahead and keep these fonts and so that they're as part of your computer. All right, if it's a school computer, you're going to put them in a different place. So if it's your own computer, my recommendation, what I do is I keep all of my fonts in one location, all of my downloaded fonts. So this is up to you, but just as a design professional, you might consider doing this. So what I would do for myself is I do something like I go to whatever place you would keep it in your documents or someplace. I keep mine in a place that any user could get to them, and it's called Design Resources. And then I've got a whole bunch of different stuff, but I have a folder that's called Fonts. And then inside of Fonts, I have a folder that is specific to Google Fonts, and then that way I know whenever I've downloaded Google Fonts. And so I would go inside of that. This is on my computer, right? This is if it's your computer. And then I would download those. This is on a Mac, okay? Now, and then once you download them, just so you know, it's going to be in a zipped format. You'll have to unzip them. I'm not going to do this right now because actually I already have this on my computer, but I'm going to show you how I would do it if I were sitting down in our classroom on a Mac school computer. So I don't want to save it to the font folder on a school computer. In fact, you probably can't. And on a Mac, if you save it somewhere, it's just going to get lost. You want to be able to port it around with you in your project folder if you're going to, need to go from computer to computer to work. And so that's why it's so important to always have those fonts with you in your folder. So even if you install it actually on your own computer, right, you should still definitely keep those fonts with you. The only reason I'm really showing you this is that if for some reason it just doesn't even work on your computer or the computer you're sitting at, because occasionally fonts do get corrupted, by the way. It's not out of the question, it's not even that unusual. So you might have to go download the fresh version like I'm showing you, but I'm going to go ahead and jump to my project folder. Okay, so I just jumped to my project folder, and then I'm going to go into my foundation book base folder. And if you remember, there was this thing called document fonts. And if this is, again, this is only if these fonts don't work, right? Then you can go ahead and download the fonts directly from here. And I'm just going to I'll call this Google downloaded fonts, okay? And I'll hit save. And then that way I'll just have them in case the other fonts don't work. Now, I'm going to go ahead and close this actually, this Google page. Now, the way to make sure that your fonts are loaded up is you open this is on a Mac. This is not true of Windows. If I go up here and I go to my search tool, I can type in font book. And even if you are a Windows user, and it's the first hit, so I'm going to go ahead and double click that to open it. Even if you're a Windows user, you still need to know how to do this if you're going to be sitting on a school computer that's a Mac, because anytime you sit down to work on something, if that font is not part of the native file system, then you're going to have to add it somehow. All right, and so on the Macs, you can just go ahead and add something to font book. So if I'm here, what I would want to do is, you probably have something that says all fonts. What I've done is I've created a new set. It's called a collection, and I called it Google Fonts. And if you want to create a new set at the computer you're sitting at, and just remember, this isn't always going to be like this. It's going to reset as soon as that computer gets logged out or it gets restarted. Anyway, you can right click and say new collection and call it whatever you want. You can call it Google Fonts or whatever. You can put it as your name so that you know what it is, because it's going to be temporary, it doesn't matter. And then what happens is that you would take your fonts from wherever the location is, okay, and then let's just say that let's say that for some reason these fonts weren't working. If I open these Google downloaded fonts, then it gives me this folder, and then I can take these two folders, Roboto and Oswald, and I could drag them and drop them right here. I'm not going to do that because you can see I already have it installed. And one of the problems that you'll find, oh, and I also have Roboto there, right? One of the problems with adding fonts that are already in existence is you would have duplicate instances of fonts, and it doesn't like that. So don't add fonts that already exist. Um, you know, this is only if your fonts aren't working properly. Okay, so, or if you're sitting at a school computer where I know they're not going to have these two fonts installed, and you need to do work on, like on a computer in the classroom. Okay, and if you are on Windows, it's actually even easier. All you have to do is you have to choose your font, and you would right click. It's not going to work because I'm on a Mac, but you would right click it and you would choose install, and it'll install the font for you in your font folder. It's really simple. Now, the thing you have to be careful of is, like, if you download hundreds of fonts, you know, thousands even, and you just start installing them, it's going to bog your computer down really badly. So this is really for Windows computers and actually for Mac font book. You really need to be careful about using those just auto install and activate things, because fonts will take up an enormous amount, believe it or not, of resources on your computer. So install the ones you need for sure and activate them and keep them active. But if you start getting into the case where you've got like thousands of fonts, you need to buy a font management system or font management tool. But we're not going to get into that because the chances of you having thousands of fonts are not that great, since fonts are very expensive. Okay, so let's move forward, and let's go ahead and open this Foundation Design Book.in.